Hello, my name is Michael Finney. Welcome back to the program. Today, I am joined by Stephanie McNutt. Would you like to say hello?
Hey, hello, everyone.
You're a writer. You're crafting words into sentences and paragraphs, but it started somewhere. Tell us about some of that.
I think my earliest memories of literature, actually, I remember there were three books in particular that I think a family friend who was like an adopted grandfather, he had a son, but he didn't have any grandchildren. So he would give gifts to my dad. They worked together for me. And I think he just wanted to spoil a grandchild. So he was just really generous to me as a kid. And actually, I think I only met him a couple of times, but he would give things to my dad. And there were three books, and I think one was Mother Goose, and it was like all of them were fairy tale-esque, and they had these beautiful, gorgeous drawings and paintings that were accompanying the words. And my mom wouldn't let me read it on my own. So she put it up because it was so special. And I remember like just begging, can I sit with it? And I would sit so carefully on the floor, and I'd open the books and look at the pictures. And I loved the rhymes, like the Mother Goose rhymes. And I would sing them. I would say them out loud, once I learned what the words were. And it made it an event. So there's an event with books that was very early on, like my earliest memories. And my father also, I think, like almost every night, he would tell me a story. We had a lot of golden books. And as I learned the story, I would tell him the story back. So like I wouldn't let him go to bed until I told him the story too. So stories and the musicality of like the rhyming poems in Mother Goose, like all of that kind of shaped this mindset around words. I was reading before I even went to school, and I think it was my father telling me stories. And I know some of that was like mimicking the story. I just remembered it, and I would tell my version back. So that was an early childhood memory. And I think that just captured my attention, and it never really went away. Like we would go to the store, and my parents would be like, okay, you get to pick a toy or something. And it was either like a Barbie doll, which I loved. I actually had a lot of Barbie dolls. I mean, a lot, probably more than I should. But equally to the Barbie doll would be the book. And so if I could get a golden book or anything like that, I would pick that probably 50% of the time. I didn't need a lot of Barbie dolls, but I seemed to want a lot of books. So I think just that, like the transformation of growing up with a household of books and that curiosity for stories, more than even the books, it was just like storytelling. I was captivated by the imagination of telling a story. And I think that developed over time, where I was kind of a snob in school. Like if a teacher told me to read a book, I probably wouldn't read it. I wanted to read what I wanted to read. I mean, I read everything. I didn't like maybe others dictating my choice. But I do remember, and it was in high school, we were asked to read My Antonia, and I didn't want to read it. I really didn't want to read it. And I don't think I read it in school at all. I wrote a report about a book I never read. But because I knew stories so well, I could write book reports about lots of books I've never read because I kind of got the point. I got the plot pretty quickly. And I remember, so we had the book, we got to keep the book. And that summer, I read My Antonia, and I fell in love with it. I was kind of obsessed with it. And I think that was a lot of the shaping of who I would become as a writer or as a poet and I've done it for myself. Like I've never been very public with my writing. I'm forcing myself to be public with my writing. And it has a lot to do with where I am right now. But more than even writing, I think it was just a love of story. That's why I love to read. Right now, I'm in the place where I wanted to discover what is someone who loves to read, loves story, the heart of story. What do they do with their life? I went to school for literature. Well, specifically literature, English, literary criticism. And I took creative writing classes, but it was more the literary criticism that I went towards. I actually went to seminary for a couple of semesters. I studied Hebrew and Greek. I loved languages. I loved words. And it always comes back to story. So my whole life has been filled with stories. My dad's a storyteller. I love to read great stories. And now I'm here, and that's all I want to do. I'm kind of obsessed with it, to be honest. So it's a long road, but it started, my first memories were with a book.
Very cool. So here's a follow-up question to that. Have you worked in publishing, or where might people have seen some of your writing or critique work in the past?
That's a good question. Actually, I did something kind of interesting that a lot of people did in COVID. I worked for a nonprofit that actually had a publishing arm with it. We were always involved in books and stuff like that. When you get a degree in literature, you're either going to be a professor, or I wasn't in the creative writing side. So either you're going to go into teach, and that could be teaching, high school, elementary, or you become a professor, which means you go back to school for that. Or you're kind of a glorified receptionist, or you can do like service industry jobs. So I took that route for practicality. I worked as a server, did a lot of, career-wise, did a lot of service industry jobs. Meanwhile, writing in the background for myself. I've worked on several novels that I've never released. Matter of fact, I think there's one that I've probably been working on for years. And much like the poetry book that I've been working on it over 20 years, I think that's a lot of my writing. But I did work in industries where there was publishing, and I took a lot of classes like with Gotham Writers Workshop, and I was part of a lot of critique groups in Denver. And I was involved in like writing groups. I was on the library board in Colorado. So I was always involved in like the literary side of things, the production side of things, to the point where like when I was on the library board, we would actually host local author events, and we would invite authors in, we'd set them up, we'd help introduce them to the local community, help get them, to sell and connect with their readers. So it was awesome. So like being part of the library board was awesome. Like it was a great way to actually connect readers to their authors. I loved that. And I still was kind of thinking, oh, maybe I'll be a writer. I'm still writing these stories. I'm still writing these poems, 20 years plus poems. And then there was the January right before COVID. And I had even, like I said, I was working for a nonprofit, and we had a publishing arm there. And I was actually thinking of moving and transitioning to the office to be closer and more involved in the publishing side. It would have been moving to Chicago. So it was kind of like, should I or shouldn't I move? And I think it was January right before COVID. And I said, I don't think I'm supposed to be a writer. I just can't. I keep writing for myself. Like I keep writing these stories. They just don't feel like me. I love stories. I love reading great literature. And I just don't feel like it. I don't feel like it's working. And COVID happened. I don't know why. I started watching Hunger Games ad nauseum. And I decided to write a fan fiction about PETA as a kid on Wattpad. And I just did it for fun because it was COVID and I had been watching Hunger Games way too much. And I decided, I'll just write this fan fiction. It's in my head. I'll just kind of work out the story. Like, because I kept trying to answer the question, like, why would he like Katniss? Like, that was the question I was trying to answer. And so I was trying to like imagine the story that would lead him to this ultimate conclusion, that he falls in love with her or whatever. And I did it in 2.5 months, 50,000 words, which is kind of the minimum to close out a book. And it was about 2 to 3 chapters a week. I think 1,500 words per chapter. And I don't know why. I don't know what motivated me. I guess we weren't doing anything but being at home. And this was right after I said, I don't think I'm going to be a writer. Like, I don't think that this is going to be my career. I'm not going to actually put a book out there. I had been part of critique groups where everybody just tore each other apart. A lot of the writing was bad. And
Love it.
have you been a part of that too?
To a degree, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So not the writer's block, I guess.
No, but I'm in another writer's DM group, and it's more incisive.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's like, and so I was a part of that. So I was like, I don't want to be a part of that. I think that's it. I didn't want to be a part of that kind of community. I didn't want to be a part of, I don't know, that. And
it's good for you.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I think I'm a little bit sad that I allowed the insecurity of seeing what those relationships were like, what without, and that I was viewing my own writing through that kind of lens. Like, I wish I had more clarity, especially because I had the schooling to back the clarity. I had the insight of critique that helped me understand good stories. And I've been reading good stories since I was a kid. So it's not that I couldn't tell what a good story was. I didn't like the environment in which these stories were being created, or the industry. I don't know what it was. But then once I finished that book, it was like, I guess I can. I guess you can do this. And when you have like readers from all over the world, like interacting with you on your story and asking you questions, it was like, it lit a fire under me. But more than that, I had people like asking me, can you help me with my work? Or especially young writers, which that is a huge motivator. When somebody who's kind of starting out just wants some help to kind of get there and figure it out for themselves and to tell their story, I think that was that's where things start to change and transform into kind of where I'm at right now, I guess.
To follow up on that, is that kind of where Ari Press, the idea for that was formulated and began to get a little bit of carving its trajectory out, let's say?
Maybe. I think that was before I knew it was going to be that, for sure. Yes, I think that was an impetus. But really, more than that, COVID happened. My husband was remote. I was remote. And there was this thing, we had visited San Diego a lot. We were just like in love with it. And it's COVID and not really doing anything but sitting at home. We're like, well, we could sit at home here. And at this time it was Wisconsin. Or we could move where we want to move and sit inside somewhere else that's a little bit nicer, or a little bit, a place we want to live. Because we knew we weren't going to stay in Wisconsin. I think that was also part of it. We didn't know where we would move to next. We had lived in Colorado for a long time. And so we were only in Wisconsin because of family health issues. That was hard, and that was a difficult period of time. But during COVID, again, like, their options and opportunities happened. We moved to San Diego area, kind of, not exactly, but like the Southern California area, I would say. And that probably more than anything was what changed to have King Ari Press, because I realized I could do one of two things. I could get another job in the service industry and write in the background, as I have done before, sacrifice for the art, as they say. Or I saw kind of this niche of like, there's a lot of writers out there self-publishing. They're not really comfortable with the process. They want to write their stories, but they really don't know how to market themselves. They don't really have anyone championing them in their work and cheering them on. And a lot of what I saw was social media was authors selling their book to other authors, but not to readers. And it became like this insular club, and nobody was getting outside of that club. And it wasn't to elevate one's craft. So it wasn't necessarily, it was there, but it wasn't necessarily to like build each other up in the craft of writing. It started to kind of look like the critique groups that I remember going to in person, where it was, oh yeah, your story's really great, but here's what I'm writing right now. And it's like, my story's really great because, and then, you could talk ad nauseum about their own story and not really listen to what else is going on in the room. And also, writers aren't necessarily your reader.
Right.
So I saw this door, right? That I was like, I love to read good stories. I don't care. I think this is it. I love to read good stories. I don't care if they're mine. Like, I'll write a good story if I want to read it. I don't care if it's my story. I just want to read good stories. That's all I've wanted since I was a little kid. I want to be a professional reader. And that, I think, that mental shift, and now I'm in a new place and I could either just go out and get any kind of job, whatever, or I could take any monies that we have. And I'm pretty conservative in the way I approach my finances. And as a business, I did like months and months of research before I even opened the doors. I was very cautious. I looked at everything. So I took it seriously as a business, but I wanted to be there because I felt that there was a need for this not large traditional press, but something that kind of represents that. And I know that there's a lot of indie presses out there. Some of them are self-serving indie presses. They're created for the author themselves to publish their work. There's nothing wrong with that. I just knew that what I really wanted is to find and amplify great stories that come across my door. If I can do that, awesome. And if I can use my funds and my resources, my time and my energy to do that and allow writers to write, which is what they want to do, like if that can be a partnership, that's more the way I look at it. I look at it as collaborative entrepreneurship. It's not me doing the thing. It's me doing the thing in collaboration with the author so that we can both build towards some success. Like, that's not going to be the model for everybody, but I definitely think it was a need within what I saw on social media.
So let's talk about your first release that is coming out on King Ari. Lamplighter.
Yes.
Poems. You got a hardback you're releasing. I think you referenced this earlier as 20 years of work, which I believe is probably, a lifetime of poetry writing gathered up and put into book form.
It's been a process. And like, I kind of was looking back at some poems, partly, if you want to be real, the main reason that you need 20 years worth of work, unless you just write poetry every day, is that's how long it takes to get enough pages to make it worth printing. I mean, I'm just going to be practical about it. You need so many poems to fill so many pages. And, some of that is formatting. So, you don't have to have that many poems, but enough. And then they need to be worth printing. That's for the reader to decide if what I've done is worth printing. But realistically, it couldn't be just everything. And, it's not my most juvenile work, but there is some like more juvenile work than others. There's some that it's pretty recent. But a collection over 20 years, I just didn't think I would. I didn't think I would do it. I'm doing it for more reasons than just publishing for me. I had family and friends say, hey, I would really like this. I actually did release a version of this for free, again, on Wattpad. This is a different iteration of it completely. And that one no longer is available, from what I can tell. I've removed it. But yeah, it is something to consider, like with poetry especially. It does take a lifetime. I mean, and I think you get to different emotional places. And so anytime you're writing poetry, it becomes a new expression over time from even similar experiences. You just start viewing things differently. So that's why I think some of it is juvenile. There's some things in here. I don't know. I'm not embarrassed. Some of it's heartbreaking. And I try to create distance in my poetry so that it's not always about me, and not a lot of my poems. There's I might be an impetus to the poem, but there's also a lot of poetry that's more an observer, kind of just looking at things. But there are a couple in here that are heartbreaking when I put them when I put the I into the poem, then they break my own heart. And I try to stay honest with it. I try to create distance, emotional distance, but honesty at the same time. And the emotional distance was more for me, not that I was trying to avoid it, but rather bring clarity without overinflating the emotion, which I think can sometimes happen in poetry. When it's just like when you over dramatize something, you try to make it more than what it is, whereas the thing itself will express and the emotion will be felt by the reader just through the expression of the thing. So I'm trying to learn that way of framing emotional content. So yeah, I would say it reveals the process of that for me as a writer, and through my poetry at least.
When can people expect it?
Our official release date is going to be May 21st. I'm on a soft release currently, just to kind of test the process. And yeah, so later in May, and I'll have it on my website, and it'll be in multiple locations. It's currently going through Amazon, and we will be opening it up. So my website will have more details on where to find it, and I will be on my social media. I will be adding that as well, so people should be able to see that as it generates. This week, more of the details about it will release, but the 21st of May.
Very cool. I dig it.
Yeah, thanks.
Are there other things that we have not talked about yet that you feel need to get out there, or that maybe you want to revisit from the conversation?
Yeah, I would like to, I'll share a poem. I feel like that's appropriate. And I'll make sure that it's only one that you will hear here, because until you actually get the book. So it's not one that I've shared yet. Oh, there is another thing. One of the things I did with a poetry book, which I don't see often enough. I don't know if you find this, Michael, but poetry for some people feels complicated because somebody might read it and they don't really understand what the author is trying to say. It's just so abstract, or the metaphors are really stretched thin. And, if you're not a poet reader, it just seems like nonsense. And I've had people be like, I don't really read poetry. I think that's changing. I think that more people are exposing themselves to poetry. But end of each section, I actually created notes for every poem. So there's author notes, and so it'll have the title of the poem, and then I give a little bit of an explanation of what inspired the poem, or just share. Sometimes it's more technical, sometimes it's more personal, like why I wrote that poem specifically. Oh, here's one. Okay, this one I wrote recently. Actually, I wrote this 2022. It's called Wormhole. Her voice flowed against strands of chestnut brown hair, blowing in the wind. Name across our neighbor's yard. For lunch, for dinner, for bed. I went out as a child, came in as an adult. Light of the silver moon met hands raised in prayer, diving into a surface of rippling tides tickling the water. My past, my present, my future. I dove in as a child, emerged as an adult. That one is kind of about my mom. She would always call to me and she'd be like, Stephanie, it's time for dinner. Stephanie, it's time for lunch. And it's not in here. And so this is a little bit background information. I was almost kidnapped. I don't write about the kidnapping in here. I've told people about it. And my mom yelled, Stephanie, it's time for lunch. And she yells it across, I was over at a neighbor's house. So she yells it across all of our yards. And, I always hear her. because she did that, and when she did that, the car that was attempting the kidnapping drove off and got freaked out. And then me and my friend and neighbor, we ran to her house, and they had these pole sheds. And we ran into the pole shed, and I called my mom and I said, "Oh, I'm going to stay over at my friend's house for lunch. Don't worry about me." And mom's like, "Okay," but she never, I don't think I might have told her this like later. So that's why I went out as a child, came back as an adult. That's the theme of like this moment of innocence where you have these experiences that kind of expose you to adults or the adult thinking that your innocence gets a little shattered. And so I wrote that poem very loosely based off of that experience. It's weird things like that, how they happen. And I just remember writing that poem, and I was thinking of my mom's strand of hair flowing in the wind, almost like a telephone, and the sound of the voice carrying. And the thing is, it's just like I can picture the wormhole is that I picture it through time still calling me. And that's more the resonance of the poem. Yeah. So that's an exclusive. I don't know if I'll share that one again. So you're welcome.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. The poem at least is in the book. So now if people listen, they'll know exactly why I wrote that. And I may not say that again. But we do have 3 authors that are coming to King Ari Press. I do want to mention them: Mary Ransom, Tony Baker, and Rich Kopaz. They'll be released from fall on. So we'll see a couple in 2024, but we'll see one in probably 2025. So we're really excited about those authors, and they signed in February. So super excited to have them on board.
Yeah, very good. Glad to see you're developing a corral of authors and getting them to put their work out into the world.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited for this. Yeah. I'm glad I can use my talent and time towards this. And if I can help anybody, that's the win right there.
Well, Stephanie, I do appreciate you taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk before too long.
Thank you, Michael. Have a great afternoon.